Good morning. It is Friday, June 14th. My second universe, number 42. Little shark, swimming through the water. Friday writer update. Starting with the flashback writing tip. Slipping into game session update, riddles and mazes. Doing a little story time based on a true story involving a little shark, a big fish, and the lost line. So, in going over my Valkyrie of Desire book and trying to enrich my main character and encourage readers to like her, immerse themselves in her, I've been slipping in a little backstory. Now, she has a chin scar that I've referenced. I've been playing around with why it seeded it there when I had an idea of trauma. She was raised in a brothel by her mother, and I had in my head that she got the scar early on when she was fighting off the advances of someone she didn't want. And I adjusted it a bit and introduced. So she's on the back of a griffin holding on to a man, present tense, in the story, and decided to refer. This experience reminded her, this is the flashback, it reminded her of childhood trauma when she got that scar. She was on the back of a horse as a child. A man had abducted her from her mother, had stolen her. And she'd kind of confused in her head what had happened. The events got squished together, and she had pushed her hatred and anger in on this man that had abducted her, who claimed to be her father. So I littered pieces of the flashback throughout the chapters heading in the first half of the book that I'm working on, where a reader will piece together that her father hadn't met her, or at least not in her memory. This is the first time meeting her, and had snatched her up and said, "I'm going to care for you. I'm going to protect you." And she had fought him because he's a stranger, and she had called out and caused her mother's guards, men, thugs, to come after this man claiming to be her father. And they got her back. Now I'm leaving out all the little details. The important thing is, a man claiming to be her father abducts her. She fights back, and that causes a chase to ensue. She gets rescued. The men that rescue her, they treat her poorly, and they do things. They have unwanted advances upon her, and she is not an adult. So I don't go into the details. It's alluded to in this flashback, in these moments, as she's, as an adult many years later, is processing this trauma, or re-examining her memories, her thoughts about it. So she gets injured there. That's where the chin. It wasn't from the man claiming to be her father. It was from the men sent by her mother to bring her back. And those men had mentioned, one of them had said something like, this was what they were doing to her was part of the payment that her mother had arranged. And then her mother went from that moment on to use the main character, Hildur, as a prostitute. And Hildur has the realization that if that man, based on other things her mother said, if that man that rescued her really was her father, then her mother was punishing him by turning her into a prostitute. So she figures out the motivation, because it never quite made sense to her. Like, why was her mother Such a horrible. What was the motivation? So the main character thinks she figures out the motivation for why her mother did what she did and how vile a woman she was. And this man that she didn't know, maybe he was horrible, maybe he wasn't, but she had put all this hate on this man, and he initiated this revenge situation against her, but her mother was the one. So it's there in the background. I hope readers will kind of figure it out and things will click as to what happened to the trauma, as how Hildur psychologically got pieced together. And her character arc is driven in part by dealing with this old trauma. This is this complicated thing I'm working on. Hey. So, yeah, novels are so much more difficult than short stories to write. That's where I'm at. And I think it's enriching, and it's really bringing her and the story alive to do this. So, the consistent thing was readers were enjoying the writing, they're enjoying a lot of things, but they weren't connecting with the main character like I need them to. So, hopefully this will help. So, writing tip for the flashback, or flashbacks in general, disperse it. Don't have it be one big info dump where you kick people out of the story. Have it enrich the story. Don't take them out of that moment. I'm doing third person present tense. I don't want to do a bunch of past tense that's going to throw them out of the story. So for her flashbacks, it's immediate, and it only for like a few sentences, a few lines, and then she's pulled back in. She kind of drifts and then pulled back in. Riddles and mazes, game session, virtual tabletop, game mastering. I had set a hook, a lure that the players have nibbled on and gotten themselves stuck upon, and they have arrived at a labyrinth guarded by a sphinx of sorts, sphinx by a different name, with a riddle as its gateway, as its lock. And the key is available. Perhaps some players' character have it, maybe. Some don't. The door is opened, and the players, the characters, are investigating the labyrinth. Let me correct myself. One character is investigating the labyrinth. One very interesting character has decided to go on ahead. So I have created this thing for a whole party to experience. And I'm allowing my plans to be derailed yet again, and have one character do some Machiavellian kind of stuff. So there's a little player versus player, I should say character versus character, that I'm allowing to happen in my game session. It's very tricky to manage because I don't want to hold hostage other players' time. So I made it a short session, stopped it, and then I'm going to have a separate session with the player that has the character that's going off on her own, and I will update next week how that goes. But I definitely see the value, the ease in railroading players to stay on track. Okay, you've got to all stick together, all be in the same place. But I'm allowing, now the group has shrunk a little bit, I'm allowing more freedom, and they're higher level. We can always have them. How I'll do it if more players want to play at the same time that I'm doing this one-on-one. They can play NPCs that her character runs into, and then I will grant experience points to the player character, or the player's main character, for their player's participation. How I try to keep it fair and encourage. good gameplay, and collaborative storytelling. I'll leave off with a little story time, and then read a riddle. Maybe I'll do the riddle now. I just wrote it this morning. If I accost you at the store, don't shake my hand. Ruder than a clam, I don't play the same shell game. When the true midsummer comes, I own the night sky. If all hearts are healed, then I will dominate death. What am I? Story time. Little Shark, Big Fish, and the Lost Line. True experience when I was maybe a little older than my son. 12, I want to say. Maybe I was younger, maybe older. But around there. It's always like a lot of memories seem to coagulate around 12, where you don't want to say you're a teenager, but you don't want to be too young. It's around there. On an ocean-faring fishing vessel, my uncle allowed me to use a fishing pole that didn't belong to him, and with a line, very expensive line, with like all kinds of frills and stuff. Going some fishing. It was a very hot day. We went out, I threw it in, waiting, and there was a splash like a whale. It was not a whale. My uncle told me it was I can't remember the fish, but he was very excited. It was a very large fish, and the best thing to catch, the best he could hope for. It was more than 6 feet long, and he explained like where he would expect it to be, the water level and stuff. And so I'm pretty excited. I go down, and I really want to catch, like, how wonderful it would be to have this monstrosity claimed by me. And unfortunately, instead, I got a teeny sand shark, maybe 2.5 feet long, really nothing. And I felt a little bad. It was not something big enough to eat, and we removed the hook and put it back in the water and caught nothing. And I kept thinking about that big fish, and my uncle saw that in me. So on the way back, he said, let the line trail out behind you, and there's maybe a fish. I don't think he really thought that we would catch anything with the line trailing behind the boat, because we were going kind of fast. And I did not set the thing quite right when I let it reel out, because it just kept going. Zzz! And the line was lost. And my uncle, one of the nicest guys in the world, maybe one of the nicest people I've ever met, just had this look of like, that was really expensive. And he was angry at me, but I was very sorry. I had a very sorry look. Now, he wasn't yelling at me or anything. Maybe he was kind of like cursing at himself. I think he like turned away, because it was as much as it was my fault, it was also his fault. And sorry, Uncle Mike. Living in Guam now. That was many decades ago, and I still remember that party foul on the fishing boat in my mind now, because my son is interested in going seafaring. So hopefully, if circumstances come up that are similar, I will make sure that the very expensive line, is secured. And that's it. I'll include the riddle in the text below. Enjoy. See you next week.